A Chinese firm has reportedly placed an order to import Australian coal in a further sign of the lifting of an unofficial ban imposed more than 2 years ago. Joining me now live is Nationals MP Keith Pitt. Thank you so much for joining us. Do you think that trade is about to resume?
Well, who knows with China? Firstly, their enquiries are good. That's good for the Australian economy. But it will mean more demand, which drives up the price even further, which makes an even greater mockery of Federal Labor's proposal to subsidise Australian coal-fired power plants by more than $1 billion on the price of coal. We should just be utilising Australia's resources for the Australian people and their benefit.
And as you know, there's been a number of industries impacted by the bans that China has imposed. If it is confirmed that China will indeed start buying Australian coal, is it an encouraging sign for those other industries?
Oh, that's very promising, and in particular for the rock lobster industry, which is more than 90% reliant on the China free trade. But we need trading partners who will actually abide by the rules. There are rules inside the agreement, inside CHAFTA, inside the WTO, and what is it that Federal Labor has given up to get these inquiries and arrangements? So we want trading partners who actually do abide by the legislation, abide by the agreements that have been made. Because how else do you get consistency? How else do we know that we do have reliable trading partners?
All right, let's move on now. I want to ask you about submarines. Do you think buying off-the-shelf submarines from the US is still feasible, given the high-level warnings to the US that it will stretch the country's industrial base to breaking point?
Well, I've seen Peter Dutton's remarks, and he is a very well-informed individual, a former Minister for Defence, a former Minister for Home Affairs, a long-term member of the National Security Committee. And I believe him when he says that they should be available and were potentially part of the deal. What concerns me is Labor seems to be playing both sides of the fence. I mean, they need to be committed fully to AUKUS. It is one of the most important security agreements our nation has ever signed. And just the idea that there is some potential for them to make significant changes or walk away from it, I don't think is in our national interest. We are in an environment which is incredibly unstable. We need a nation which is stronger, not weaker.
Peter Dutton also said that the coalition will support the government on AUKUS and is asking the Prime Minister to press that case for acquiring these submarines in the next decade. Do you think that that'll be enough to fill Australia's capability gap?
Oh, well, we can always do more. In government, we committed significant amounts to defence, including increasing their capacity. But these submarines are critical to Australia's future defence needs. And it will also mean that we build a new economy in Australia around the nuclear industry. You can't have nuclear submarines without nuclear support, nuclear technical capabilities, including in skills. And it's up to Federal Labor to outline how that's going to occur.
There's significant flooding right now in WA's Kimberley region. Is the Prime Minister doing the right thing, visiting that region and announcing help to flood-affected communities?
Well, firstly, the fact that the PM is attending, well, that's good. And I think that's very positive, and you need that support in the regions. You do look to your governments, you look to Defence for support, and many of the regional MPs, including me, have been through these issues before. But I think the Australian people, quite rightly want to know why it wasn't last week, or why the PM wasted a significant amount of time at the SCG for a game that wasn't even in play and was washed out. So I think the regions have real questions to answer. There is a significant rebuild that will be required, particularly on roads. And without that link in infrastructure, you can't get the food and fibre and resource products out to market, and that is a huge part of Australia's economy.
All right, just finally, I want to ask you about the Indigenous voice to Parliament. Yesterday, Peter Dutton came out saying that more detail is needed. He said that Labor is treating Australians like mugs. Did he go too far, particularly given that the Liberal Party hasn't actually announced its position yet?
Oh, not at all. I mean, Peter Dutton is right. These are changes to Australia's constitution. It's not a note in your lunchbox from your mum. These are significant changes to one of the most important documents in our country. Yet we see no detail. Labor's proposition is vote yes and feel good. And if you vote no, you can't even at the moment get a tax deductibility if you provide support to the no case. They're not providing equal funding for yes or no. I think every Australian has every right to be suspicious of the proposal. These are the dangers, and Peter's asked reasonable questions that should be answered.